I know you feel like you want me, and I guess in a way you do. Holding my breath, unraveling emotions. I need some space to think this through. Call me on now.
Hi guys, this is Raju Rahman from Tectonic. In today's video, I take a look at the Glap Android gaming controller, also known by some as the Dragon Slay Titan controller. It cost me £79.99, which is a fair bit more than what I would pay for a controller. But I've already tried two budget-friendly options like the Saitake 7007X and Flydigi Wee 2T. So even though I'm a little late with this one, I thought I'd finally try out something slightly more expensive. If you're interested in finding out what I think of this controller, keep watching. Opening the box, the first thing you see is the protective travel case. That's great if you want to take the controller around with you without damaging it. You get a thank you card. There's Glap branding here on the top left side of the travel case, which looks really cool. The controller's fastened in using Velcro. Opening that, you get access to the quick start guide, and because why not, a sticker pack too. The controller itself with its symmetrical analog stick placement. Other than that, it seems to borrow a lot from the Xbox controller. Anyways, let's put the controller to the side for a bit. You have a little red box containing a Type A to USB Type C charging cable. So back to the device itself, you can see the caution sign here in red, warning you of possibly trapping your finger, so bear that in mind. For a telescopic controller, it's pretty big, especially if you compare it to the Saitake 707X, and even more so if you compare it to the Flydigi Wee 2T. Its dimensions are 205.6 by 109.3 by 69.7 millimeters. The controller weighs 236 grams, but doesn't feel very heavy. You've got dual shoulder buttons, so there's L1, R1, L2 and R2. These triggers are analog, so that's really great. For instance, you can control how much gas or throttle you'd like to apply in a racing game. It gives you much more control. You've got dual analog sticks, both which can be pushed down, so that's the L3 and R3 buttons. A full-size D-pad with a pivot point in the middle. It feels very good. You've got 4 face buttons, X, Y, B and A buttons, select, start, home and the power/Bluetooth button. On the bottom right grip, you've got the USB-C charging port for charging the 340 mAh battery, which should give you around 10 hours of runtime. Here just above the D-pad you have the indicator LED. If the battery is low, it will go orange. It will flash red while it's being charged. When it's fully charged, it will turn solid red, and of course it will flash blue in pairing mode and go solid blue once it has paired. Another thing you might have noticed is this bit of plastic just underneath the D-pad and the face buttons. They protrude out a little bit. It seems like this would cover some of your screen, but rest assured it won't. It just covers a little bit of your phone's bezel, so it doesn't get in the way of your game whatsoever. You've got a good amount of rubber padding so that you don't scratch up your phone while placing it in the controller. Both the size and texture of the handles make it easier to hold and provides a decent amount of grip. Around the back of the controller you can see the R2 and L2 buttons more clearly. You have the lock here for the telescopic spring mechanism. Pulling this to the side allows you to extend the controller to fit various sized devices, the max being 7.5 inches in height. The spring mechanism is very strong. You can see unlocking the spring snaps the controller back into place quite violently. So yeah, don't trap your finger in there. Best case scenario, you'll get your nails clipped. Worst case scenario, I'd rather not find out. So let's get this controller set up. My indicator LED is already flashing blue, which means it's in Bluetooth pairing mode. But in order to get into pairing mode, just press the power button once. On your phone, go to Bluetooth settings, scroll down to find available devices. The controller should be listed as Glap Play P/1. Just tap that and it should pair. Once paired and connected, you'll see it here on the top under paired devices. So by default, when you pair the Glap, it will automatically go into X input mode. This means this controller supports games and services with native controller support right out the box. Connected via X input mode also means you can navigate around the Android operating system straight from the controller, which is always convenient. As you can see, it easily fits my Galaxy Z Fold 2 with its height of 159.2mm, so this controller is clearly designed for larger phones. Of course, my Sony Xperia 1, which is slightly taller at 167mm, also fits perfectly. But because it's a bit narrow width-wise, it doesn't completely fill the controller and looks a little odd. But that's just purely visual. Functionally, it still works perfectly. All the buttons on the controller are very tactile and provide a satisfying click as you'd expect from a controller within this price bracket. D-pad feels great with a very good pivot. It's very responsive, and of all the controllers I've tried so far, it feels like the best one among them. It's super easy pulling off special moves and beat 'em ups with this D-pad. They're pretty smooth too, so less chance of getting blisters on your thumb after extended gaming sessions. Normally, analog sticks on gamepads like this are pretty bad. The ones on the Saitake 707X are dreadful, and although not perfect, the ones on the Flydigi Wee 2T were okay. So having paid much more for the Glap, you'd expect more accuracy and no dead zone. Regarding the former, I'm happy to say these are very good analog sticks. They're very precise. I wish they were a tad bit larger, taking into consideration the controller itself is pretty big, so it's not like they ran out of space. Regardless, the sticks are great. They provide a decent amount of resistance, but not as much as an Xbox or PlayStation controller. As for dead zones, you can see here on this test, in reality it's not perfect, but it's still pretty good. The sticks are precise enough for me to draw out spirals, and if it's good enough to do that, I'm more than happy with it. Having used this controller for about a week now, the biggest letdown for me are the shoulder buttons. L1 and R1 buttons are just way too big for my liking. I mean, what were they thinking when they did this? The placement of these buttons and the size makes it really tough to switch between L1 and L2 or R1 and R2. Naturally, your fingers end up resting below the L1 and R1 buttons, so it does take some getting used to. As an example, normally you would use just your index fingers for shoulder buttons, but this design means you have to dedicate your index finger to one shoulder button and your middle finger for the trigger. It's something that I'm still finding hard to adapt to. I've tried this controller with various game streaming services. Here you can see me using Xbox Game Pass. The controller works perfectly with it. Of course, it also works great with other services like Stadia, Geforce Now and Steam Link. All these services require a gamepad with X input support, so the Glap works with them without any additional setup. All the emulators I tried worked perfectly out of the box because they support controllers natively. Here's God of War, Ghost of Sparta on PPSSPP. Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure on Pizza Boy GBA. New Super Mario Bros. On DraStic. Altered Beast on MD.emu. The Dolphin emulator needed some initial setup, but once that was done it worked great too. Here's Donkey Kong Country Returns on Dolphin. Something that really surprised me was being able to play Call of Duty Mobile without using any sort of on-screen button mapping app. So unlike the Wii 2T and the 7007X I reviewed, it just works with quad straight out the box. Having seen some initial reviews about this controller last year in 2019, no one mentioned out of the box support for quad, so this is pretty amazing. If you want a list of more compatible games, just head on over to the Glap website. There's plenty of games that support this controller natively. So What do you do when the game you want to play isn't on this list and doesn't support controllers natively? For instance, I recently started playing a game called Genshin Impact. It's a visually stunning and a truly fun fantasy-based open world action RPG. Anyways, Glap doesn't make any button mapping applications, so in this situation you would have to use a third-party app like Panda. It's not something I'm a huge fan of because it requires activating via the computer, but once it's set up, it works pretty well, as you can see here. This device uses Bluetooth 4.1, so not the latest standard, but the connection has been really good, no dropout or disconnections, and I've personally not experienced any input lag. Finally, to conclude, having used this controller extensively for over a week now, I can confidently say of all the controllers I've reviewed so far, this is my favourite. Yes, it's quite big, but it feels solid and premium, and it should feel premium because this cost £79.99. That's pretty expensive. Before purchasing this controller, the size was somewhat putting me off. My assumption was that it would just be too big, but I'm happy to say the size doesn't hinder anything. It's actually very comfortable to hold for long periods. The analog sticks are great, they're very accurate and work really well with first-person shooters. You've also got analog trigger buttons which you don't get with cheaper controllers, and all the buttons including the D-pad feels great, except for L1 and R1 that is. They're just insanely large. It forces you to use both your index and middle fingers at the same time. If it wasn't for that, this would be the nearest to perfect controller for Android. Another thing I wish Glap had done is create their own button mapping app. After paying 79 quid, you shouldn't have to purchase and use Panda. With all that said, if you have a large phone and are willing to spend a little extra for something that's clearly built to last and is a joy to use, it's an easy decision, bearing in mind that it will take a little while to get used to the shoulder buttons. I'm still happy to recommend the Glap Play. If you're interested, I've placed a link to the product page in the description below. This has been Raju Rahman from Tectonic. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and it helped you, please subscribe and like. That would really help me out. And don't forget to check out these other videos too.